Yeah. Let everyone get. Going to wait until McConnell sits down. The clerk will call the names of the next group.
Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mr. Thune.
You all belong. That's the beauty of our democracy, Chuck. Okay. Please raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office you are about to enter, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations, Senators. Congratulations. The clerk will call the names of the next group.
Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Vance, Mr. Warnock, Mr. Welch.
Oh, you are just the best. Please raise your right hand and repeat after, well, don't repeat after me, but do take this seriously. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which you are about to enter, so help you God?
I do. I do.
Congratulations, Senators. Congratulations. The clerk will call the names of the next group.
Mr. Wyden, Mr. Young,
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which you are about to enter, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations, Senators.
Madam President,
Majority Leader.
I note the absence of a quorum.
The absence of a quorum having been suggested, the clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Blackburn, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Booker, Mr. Bozeman, Mr. Braun, Mrs. Britt, Mr. Brown, Mr. Budd, Ms. Cantwell, Mrs. Capito, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Cassidy, Ms. Collins, Mr. Coons, Mr. Cornyn,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez Masto, Mr. Cotton, Mr. Kramer, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Cruz, Mr. Daines, Ms. Duckworth, Mr. Durbin, Ms. Ernst. Your Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Fetterman, Mrs. Fisher, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mr. Haggerty, Ms. Hassan, Mr. Hawley, Mr. Heinrich, Mr. Hickenlooper, Mr. Hickenlooper, Ms. Hirono, Mr. Hoven, Mrs. Hyde-Smith, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Kane, Mr. Kelly, Mr. Kennedy, Mr. King, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Langford, Mr. Lee, Mr. Lujan, Ms. Lummis, Mr. Manchin, Mr. Markey, Mr. Marshall, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mr. Murphy, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Ossoff, Mr. Padilla, Mr. Paul, Mr. Peters, Mr. Reed, Mr. Risch, Mr. Romney, Ms. Rosen, Mr. Rounds, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Sass, Mr. Schatz, Mr. Schmidt, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Scott of Florida, Mr. Scott of South Carolina, Mrs. Shaheen, Ms. Sinema, Ms. Smith, Ms. Stabenow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Sullivan, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Tillis, Mr. Tuberville, Mr. Van Hollen, Mr. Vance, Mr. Warner, Mr. Warnock, Ms. Warren, Mr. Welch, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden.
The clerk now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar.
Madam Clerk, I rise today at the direction of the House Democratic Caucus to place into nomination for election to the position of Speaker of the House of Representatives the pride of Brooklyn, Hakeem Jeffries of New York. Today, Madam Clerk, House Democrats are united. United by a Speaker who will put people over politics. Hakeem Jeffries has worked his entire life to improve economic opportunity for all people. He is committed to strengthening the American dream by lowering costs for working families, building safer communities, by taking weapons of war off streets, and by creating good-paying jobs in industries of the future. As we work to implement our historic legislative accomplishments of the last 2 years, House Democrats are united behind a Speaker who wants to make things in America and bring home jobs that have been shipped overseas, to write a tax code that rewards hard work, not wealth, to invest in clean energy that reduces our country's dependence on fossil fuels, from voting rights to reproductive rights. We are united, Madam Clerk. We are unified behind a Speaker who is an unapologetic advocate for protecting and expanding our freedoms. He does not traffic in extremism. He does not grovel to or make excuses for a twice-impeached so-called former president. Madam Clerk, he does not bend a knee to anyone who would seek to undermine our democracy. Because, Madam Clerk, that's not what leaders do. Because he understands what great leaders of this House understand, that this body and this institution are best equipped to serve the needs of this democracy and the beautiful mosaic of the members it sends. That our responsibility as members of this body is to protect the American dream and honor the sacrifice of the generations before us. Like the sacrifice of a mother and a social worker who borrowed against her pension to put her children through school. Mom and Dad were determined that their children would graduate without any debt so that they could pursue their dreams to the best of their ability, no matter the hardship or the sacrifice. Today, Hakeem's leadership style is quite simple. Spread love, it's the Brooklyn way. And it's born of this working class upbringing in that same borough. Hakeem and his brother were raised in the first home that their parents ever bought, thanks to their collectively bargained salary, and it's where they live today. It was in this house where his younger brother saw a future leader, where his mother saw a thoughtful, passionate young man, and where his father saw a competitor whose GPA went up when his younger brother started high school. His family always at his side, some here with us today and some watching from home. His mom and dad, Kenny, JJ, Joshua, and his younger brother, Dr. Hassan Jeffries. Mrs. Jeffries and her husband told their sons, "It doesn't matter what you do, but it has to be done in the service of people." And that's how Hakeem will lead. He's going to serve all of us so that we can best serve the American public. That selflessness, that commitment to success of those around you is what shaped his career and what will shape our joint future together. He knows success isn't about personal achievement. He's a leader who will be with you in the beginning, whether it's your bill and an important priority in your district. He'll ride alongside you as you do the work, and he'll be there at the end to see you through. Because he knows that our success means that we can raise the quality of life for our constituents, creating better jobs and building safer communities. He has guided every step of the way by his faith and his mom instilled in him. Sunday mornings weren't always easy in the Jeffries house. The young man who knew he wanted to be a lawyer would argue with his mom about going to church that day. But failure is a good teacher. He lost those arguments, and now Hakeem goes to church every weekend, sometimes that one where his church family is at Cornerstone Baptist, or somewhere else in the district where he can meet his constituents where they are. He remembers that after church on Sundays, he'd go to Nano's house, where there was an open door at his grandmother's house for the entire neighborhood and their elders to come through with food and conversation. A young Hakeem listening to everything, but usually just trying to catch the score of the Jets game. This is where wisdom gets passed down. And now, guided by the faith and wisdom of leaders like Jim Clyburn, Greg Meeks, John Lewis, Steny Hoyer, and Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi. It is shaped by that guidance that we are prepared to nominate a leader who will open the door to the new generation of leadership. Madam Clerk, a Latino is nominating for leader of this chamber a black man for the first time in our history. Madam Clerk, that's progress, and it's progress that the country wants to continue, for this Congress and for our country. Therefore, as chair of the Democratic caucus, I am directed by the vote of that caucus to present for election to the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 118th Congress the name of the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, Representative-elect from the state of New York.
The names of the Honorable Kevin McCarthy, a representative-elect from the state of California, and the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, a representative-elect from the state of New York, have been placed in nomination. Are there further nominations?
Madam Clerk, there is.
The gentleman from Arizona is recognized.
America knows that Washington is broken. The power doesn't reside in the Speaker. It doesn't in the Majority Leader, nor the Minority Leader, nor the whips. The power resides in we, the people entrusted us here, each individual member, to represent their district, their state, and the federal government. Washington's broken. We're the last ones to know. A wise person once told me, good process builds good policy, builds good politics. We got to return to that. It is with that I place the name of my friend and colleague from Arizona, Andy Biggs, for Speaker of the House. Thank you.
Are there further nominations? There being no further nominations, the clerk appoints the following tellers. The gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Loudermilk. The gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee. the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Steele, and the gentleman from New York, Mr. Morelli. The tellers will come forward and take their seats at the desk in front of the speaker's rostrum.
Let them get set up first.
The names of the Honorable Kevin McCarthy, a representative-elect from the state of California, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries, a representative-elect from the state of New York, and the Honorable Andy Biggs, a representative-elect from the state of Arizona, have been placed in nomination. The roll now will be called, and those responding to those names will indicate by surname the nominee of their choosing. The reading clerk will now call the roll. Adams. Adams. Jeffries. Adderholt. McCarthy. Aguilar. Jeffries. Alford.
Kevin McCarthy.
McCarthy. Allen.
McCarthy.
McCarthy. Allred. Jeffries. Midday.
Bakersfield High, home of the drillers,
McCarthy.
McCarthy.
Armstrong. McCarthy. Arrington. McCarthy. Auchincloss. Jeffries. Babin. McCarthy. Bacon. McCarthy. Baird. McCarthy. Balderson. McCarthy. Ballant. Jeffries. Banks. McCarthy. Barr. McCarthy. Berrigan. Jeffries. Bean of Florida.
Kevin McCarthy.
McCarthy. Beatty.
I proudly cast my historic vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Bentz. McCarthy. Barra. Jeffries. Bergman. McCarthy. Beyer. Jeffries. Bice.
Biggs. Biggs. Bilirakis. McCarthy. Bishop of Georgia. Jeffries. Bishop of North Carolina. Biggs. Blumenauer. Jeffries. Blunt Rochester. Jeffries. Boebert. Jordan. Bonamici. Jeffries. Bost. McCarthy. Bowman. Jeffries. Boyle of Pennsylvania. Jeffries. Rakeen. Banks. Brown. Jeffries. Brownlee. Jeffries. Buchanan. McCarthy. Buck. McCarthy. Bouchon. McCarthy. Baczynski. Jeffries. Burchett. McCarthy. Burgess. McCarthy. Burleson. McCarthy. Bush. Jeffries. Calvert. McCarthy. Kamek. Kamek. McCarthy. Caraveo. Jeffries. Carbajal. Jeffries. Cardenas. Jeffries. Carey. McCarthy. Carl.
Speaker of the House, 118th Congress, Kevin McCarthy.
McCarthy. Carson. Jeffries. Carter of Georgia. McCarthy. Carter of Louisiana. Jeffries. Carter of Texas. McCarthy. Cartwright. Jeffries. Kassar. Jeffries. Case. Jeffries. Caston. Jeffries. Castor of Florida. Jeffries. Castro of Texas. Castro of Texas. Jeffries. Chavez DeReamer. McCarthy. Sherfilis McCormick. Jeffries. Chu. Jeffries. Cicilline. Jeffries. Suscobani. McCarthy. Clark of Massachusetts. Jeffries. Clark of New York.
The bad, brilliant brother from Brooklyn.
Jeffries. Cleaver. Jeffries. Klein. McCarthy. Cloud. Jordan. Clyburn. Jeffries. Clyde. Biggs. Cohen.
I have 8 times passed my vote for the greatest speaker of the generation, maybe the greatest speaker this House has ever known, Nancy Pelosi. I proudly cast my vote for the next great speaker of the House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Cole. McCarthy. Collins. McCarthy. Comer. McCarthy. Connolly. Jeffries. Correa. Jeffries. Costa. Jeffries. Courtney. Jeffries. Craig. Jeffries. Crane. Biggs. Crawford. McCarthy. Crenshaw. McCarthy. Crockett. Jeffries. Crow. Jeffries. Cuellar. Jeffries. Curtis. McCarthy. Davids of Kansas. Jeffries. Davidson. McCarthy. Davis of Illinois. Jeffries. Davis of North Carolina. Jeffries. Dean of Pennsylvania. Jeffries. DeGette. Jeffries. Dela Cruz.
From the French state of Texas, Kevin
McCarthy. McCarthy. DeLauro. Jeffries. Del Bene. Jeffries. DeLuzio. Jeffries. DeSaulnier. Jeffries. Desjardins. McCarthy. D'Esposito. McCarthy. Diaz-Balart. McCarthy. Dingle.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Doggett. Jeffries. Donalds. McCarthy. Duarte. McCarthy. Duncan. McCarthy. Dunn of Florida. McCarthy. Edwards. McCarthy. Elsie. McCarthy. Emmer. McCarthy. Escobar. Jeffries. Eshue. Jeffries. Espaillat. Jeffries. Estes. McCarthy. Evans. Jeffries. Ezell. McCarthy. Fallon. McCarthy. Finstra. McCarthy. Ferguson. McCarthy. Finstad. McCarthy. Fishbach. McCarthy. Fitzgerald. McCarthy. Fitzpatrick. McCarthy. Fleischman. McCarthy. Fletcher. Jeffries. Flood. McCarthy. Foster. Jeffries. Fushi. Jeffries. Fox. McCarthy. Lois Frankel. Jeffries. C. Scott Franklin. McCarthy. Frost. Jeffries. Fry. McCarthy. Fulcher. McCarthy. Gates. Biggs. Gallagher. McCarthy. Gallego. Jeffries. Garamendi. Jeffries. Garbarino. McCarthy. Mike Garcia. McCarthy. Robert Garcia. Jeffries. Garcia of Illinois. Jeffries. Garcia of Texas. Jeffries. Jimenez. McCarthy. Golden of Maine. Jeffries. Goldman of New York. Jeffries. Gomez. Jeffries. Tony Gonzalez. McCarthy. Vicente Gonzalez. Jeffries. Good of Virginia. Biggs. Gooden of Texas. McCarthy. Gosar. Biggs. Gottheimer. Jeffries. Granger. McCarthy. Graves of Louisiana. McCarthy. Graves of Missouri. McCarthy. Green of Tennessee. McCarthy. Green of Texas.
And still I rise, and I proudly cast my vote on behalf of the enslaved people who built this capital. I cast my vote for the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Green of Georgia. McCarthy. Griffith. McCarthy. Grijalva. Jeffries. Grothman. McCarthy. Guest. McCarthy. Guthrie. McCarthy. Hageman. McCarthy. Harder of California. Jeffries. Harris. Zeldin. Harshbarger. McCarthy. Hayes. Jeffries. Hearn. McCarthy. Higgins of Louisiana. McCarthy. Higgins of New York. Jeffries. Hill. McCarthy. Himes. Jeffries. Henson. McCarthy. Horsford.
I proudly cast my vote for the passionate member, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Houchin. McCarthy. Houlihan. Jeffries. Hoyer. Jeffries. Hoyle of Oregon. Jeffries. Hudson. McCarthy. Huffman. Jeffries. Huizinga. McCarthy. Hunt. McCarthy. Issa. McCarthy. Ivy. Jeffries. Jackson of Illinois. Jeffries. Jackson of North Carolina. Jeffries. Jackson of Texas. McCarthy. Jackson Lee.
Spirit of Martin Luther King, John Lewis, and Elijah Cummings, I'm hugely proud to cast my vote for the next speaker, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Jacobs. Jeffries. James. McCarthy. Jayapal. Jeffries. 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 Johnson of Georgia. Jeffries. Johnson of Louisiana. McCarthy. Johnson of Ohio. McCarthy. Johnson of South Dakota. McCarthy. Jordan. McCarthy. Joyce of Ohio. McCarthy. Joyce of Pennsylvania. McCarthy. Camlogger Dove.
Representing California's 37th District, Hakeem Jeffries, all the way.
Jeffries. Captor.
Ohio 9 proudly passes our vote with distinguished working class.
Jeffries. Kane of New Jersey. McCarthy. Keating. Jeffries. Kelly of Illinois. Jeffries. Kelly of Mississippi. McCarthy. Kelly of Pennsylvania. LaHood. McCarthy. Loida. McCarthy. LaMalfa. McCarthy. Lamborn. McCarthy. Landsman. Jeffries. Langworthy. McCarthy. Larson of Washington. Jeffries. Larson of Connecticut. Jeffries. Latta. McCarthy. LaTurner. McCarthy. Lawler.
The Honorable Kevin McCarthy.
McCarthy. Lee of California. Jeffries. Lee of Florida. McCarthy. Lee of Nevada. Jeffries. Lee of Pennsylvania. Jeffries. Ledger Fernandez. Jeffries. Lesko. McCarthy. Letlow. McCarthy. Levin. Jeffries. Liu. Jeffries. Lofgren. Jeffries. Loudermilk. McCarthy. Lucas. McCarthy. Lukemeyer. McCarthy. Luna. Jordan. Luttrell. McCarthy. Lynch. Jeffries. Mace. Kevin. McCarthy. Magaziner. Jeffries. Maliotakis. McCarthy. Mann. McCarthy. Manning. Jeffries. Massey. McCarthy. Mast. McCarthy. Matsui. Jeffries. McBath. Jeffries. McCarthy. McCarthy. McCall. McCarthy. McLean. McCarthy. McClintock. McCarthy. McCullum. Jeffries. McCormick. McCarthy. McGarvey. Jeffries. McGovern. Jeffries. McHenry. McCarthy. Meeks. Jeffries. Menendez. Jeffries. Ming. Jeffries. Muser. McCarthy. Mfume.
Madam Clerk, on this historic day, I am proud to cast my vote for the distinguished gentleman from New York, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Miller of Illinois. Jordan. Miller of Ohio. McCarthy. Miller of West Virginia. McCarthy. Miller Meeks. McCarthy. Mills. McCarthy. Molinaro. McCarthy. Molinar. McCarthy. Mooney. McCarthy. Moore of Alabama. McCarthy. Moore of Utah. McCarthy. Moore of Wisconsin.
Madam Clerk, I proudly cast my vote for the Honorable Hakeem
Jeffries. Moran. McCarthy. Morelli. Jeffries. Moskowitz. Jeffries. Moulton. Jeffries. Mervan. Jeffries. Mullen. Jeffries. Murphy. McCarthy. Nadler. Jeffries. Napolitano. Jeffries. Neal. Jeffries. Nagoose. Jeffries. Nels. McCarthy. Newhouse. McCarthy. Nickel. Jeffries. Norcross. Jeffries. Norman. Biggs. None of Iowa. McCarthy. Obernolte. McCarthy. Ocasio-Cortez. Jeffries. Ogles.
American patriot, gentleman from Ohio, Jim Jordan.
Jordan. Omar. Jeffries. Owens. McCarthy. Pallone. Jeffries. Palmer. McCarthy. Panetta. Jeffries. Pappas. Jeffries. Pasquarel. Jeffries. Payne.
Wishing right now that the rules of the House allow the top voter to win. Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Pelosi. Peltola. Jeffries. Pence. McCarthy. Perez. Jeffries. Perry. Biggs. Peters. Jeffries. Pedersen. Jeffries. Pfluger. McCarthy. Phillips. Jeffries. Pingree. Jeffries. Pocan. Jeffries. Porter. Jeffries. Posey. McCarthy. Presley.
On behalf of the Massachusetts 7,
Jeffries. Quigley. Jeffries. Ramirez.
Ms. Latina from the Illinois 3rd Congressional District votes for the speaker that's going to defend immigrant rights, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Raskin.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Reschenthaler. McCarthy. Rogers of Washington. McCarthy. Rogers of Alabama. McCarthy. Rogers of Kentucky. McCarthy. Rose.
Kevin McCarthy.
McCarthy. Rosendale. Biggs. Ross. Jeffries. Rouser. McCarthy. Roy. Who did he say? He said Donalds. Donalds. Ruiz. Jeffries. Rupersberger. Jeffries. Rutherford. McCarthy. Ryan. Jeffries. Salazar. McCarthy. Salinas. Jeffries. Sanchez. Jeffries. Santos. McCarthy. Sarbanes. Jeffries. Scalise. McCarthy. Scanlon. Jeffries. Schakowsky. Jeffries. Schiff. Jeffries. Snyder. Jeffries. Skolton. Jeffries. Schreier. Jeffries. Swikert. McCarthy. Austin Scott. McCarthy. David Scott. Jeffries. Scott of Virginia. Jeffries. Self. Jordan. Sessions. McCarthy. Sewell.
I proudly cast my vote for the Prince of the People's Republic of Brooklyn, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Sherman. Jeffries. Sherrill. Jeffries. Simpson.
Son of a California firefighter, Kevin McCarthy.
McCarthy. Slotkin. Jeffries. Smith of Missouri. McCarthy. Smith of Nebraska. McCarthy. Smith of New Jersey. McCarthy. Smith of Washington. Jeffries. Smucker. McCarthy. Sorensen. Jeffries. Soto. Jeffries. Spanberger. Jeffries. Sparts. McCarthy. Stansbury.
On behalf of the great state of New Mexico, I proudly cast my ballot for the brilliant, eloquent, and amazing next Speaker of the House, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Stanton. Jeffries. Stauber. McCarthy. Steele. McCarthy. Stefanik. McCarthy. Stile. McCarthy. Stubbe. McCarthy. Stevens. Jeffries. Stewart. McCarthy. Strickland.
Without hesitation, I proudly cast my vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Strong. McCarthy. Swalwell. Jeffries. Sykes.
Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Takano.
Madam Clerk, I'm with Team Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Tenney. McCarthy. Tanadar.
Proudly from Detroit, Michigan, Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Thompson of California. Jeffries. Thompson of Mississippi. Jeffries. Thompson of Pennsylvania. McCarthy. Tiffany. McCarthy. Timmons. McCarthy. Titus. Jeffries. Tlaib. Jeffries. Takuda.
From the great state of Hawaii, we vote Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Tonko. Jeffries. Torres of California. Jeffries. Torres of New York. Jeffries. Trahan. Jeffries. Trone. Jeffries. Turner. McCarthy. Underwood. Jeffries. Valadeo. McCarthy. Van Drew.
Mr. Kevin McCarthy.
McCarthy. Van Dyne. McCarthy. Van Orden. McCarthy. Vargas. Jeffries. Vasquez.
New Mexico for Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. VC. Jeffries. Velasquez. Jeffries. Wagner. McCarthy. Wahlberg. McCarthy. Waltz. McCarthy. Wasserman Schultz. Jeffries. Waters. Jeffries. Watson Coleman.
With my heart stayed on the preservation of democracy and the protection of integrity, I cast my vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
Jeffries. Weber of Texas. McCarthy. Webster of Florida. McCarthy. Winstrup. McCarthy. Westerman. McCarthy. Wexton. Jeffries. Wild. Jeffries. Williams of Georgia. Jeffries. Williams of New York. McCarthy. Williams of Texas. McCarthy. Wilson of Florida. Jeffries. Wilson of South Carolina. McCarthy. Whitman. McCarthy. Womack. McCarthy. Yackham. McCarthy. Zinke. McCarthy.
Nobody didn't answer, right?
Right, everybody did.
So I think we'll just skip to the third.